Good evening, dear listener. Find a cozy spot, perhaps adjust your blanket, pour a warm cup of tea, and gently rest your head on your pillow. Take a deep breath, letting the quietness settle around you like a soft, familiar fog. Tonight you're invited to relax as you drift into a world where castles aren't just fairy tales, but something a little stranger, more shadowed, more layered than the shining turrets and drawbridges we often imagine. Imagine a place where stone walls aren't just meant to impress, but to hide secrets and whispering corridors. Think of a world where the grand halls echo with more silence than celebration, and the flags flutter not with joy, but with the weight of centuries. Somewhere a fortress stands not as a playground for knights and princesses, but as a silent guardian, more imposing than fun, more riddled with shadows than stories of happy endings. As you breathe in the cool night air, let your senses fade into the murmur of a distant wind, carrying secrets through narrow, winding streets. Feel the faint tremor of anticipation, like the flicker of a candle struggling against the dark. The air is thick, almost tangible, with stories waiting to be uncovered, with truths more complex than fairy tales often reveal. And as your eyelids grow heavier, prepare to open them, not in your familiar world, but in a place where history breathes through every stone, and the fun promised by fairy tales is just a whisper behind the fortress walls. Soon you'll wake in a realm where shadows dance a little longer, and the true story of castles begins to unfold. You open your eyes slowly, and the first thing that greets you is a rough, uneven surface beneath you, perhaps a cold, splintered wooden plank or a coarse stone floor, uneven and unforgiving. The smell of damp, mouldy stone mixes with the faint, bitter scent of burnt herbs and something more pungent, perhaps the lingering odor of sweat or spilled ale. You shift slightly, and the texture of your rough woolen blanket scratches against your skin, offering minimal comfort. The air around you is thick and heavy, carrying whispers of distant voices, the clatter of metal, and the occasional muffled groan, sounds that seem to echo from the shadows cast by flickering torches or candlelight. Your senses are immediately assaulted by a symphony of sights and smells. Shadows dance across cracked walls, their shapes flickering as if alive, while faint streaks of sunlight struggle through small, narrow windows, casting thin, jagged lines on the dirt floor. Rags, cloaks, and strange embroidered garments are strewn about, some hanging from hooks or thrown over rough-hewn furniture. A mask with a long, curved beak rests on a nearby table, its beak stained with what looks like dried herbs or old blood, reminding you that this is no place of leisure, but one of necessity and survival. The air hums with activity. Somewhere, a blacksmith's hammer strikes metal with a rhythmic thud, clang, clang, each strike echoing like a heartbeat. Outside, you hear the distant tolling of bells, signaling the hour, or perhaps summoning townsfolk for some urgent purpose. The faint, sharp scent of vinegar and burning wood overlays the more pungent aroma of unwashed bodies and stale bread. Nearby, a child's cry pierces the background noise, quickly replaced by the hurried footsteps of a merchant or a soldier passing by, their movements quick and purposeful. You notice your clothing, rough, coarse, and itchy, clinging uncomfortably to your skin. The fabric is stiff from dirt and years of wear, and your hands, rough and calloused, instinctively reach for a cup of cool, murky water that's been left nearby. The liquid tastes faintly of iron and something else, perhaps the remnants of old wine or spoiled fruit, making you grimace. You realize that your mouth feels dry, your throat parched from the dusty, smoky air. Now imagine your first reaction, an odd mix of confusion, humor, and a touch of disbelief. Your idea of a bad morning used to be forgetting your phone charger or spilling coffee on your shirt. Here, it's realizing that your mask smells worse than the patients you're supposed to help, and that your bed is nothing more than a hard, cold slab of stone that squeaks when you shift. Your modern comforts, cushions, hot showers, soft beds are replaced by rough fabrics and the constant hum of life's more gritty realities. You might chuckle inwardly at the thought, but the irony is sharp. This isn't a scene from a fairy tale, and fun here is a foreign concept. You sit up carefully, feeling the ache in your joints and the stiffness in your limbs. With a tentative movement, you reach for your rough cloak, pulling it around your shoulders, then stand unsteadily. Your legs wobble slightly, accustomed to softer, more forgiving surfaces. As you straighten, you catch sight of the bustling village or town around you, cluttered, lively, and a little chaotic. People move with purpose, doctors tending to the sick, soldiers sharpening their swords, women carrying water, children darting between adults' legs. Their faces are lined with worry, exhaustion, or curiosity as they glance your way, perhaps recognizing something unfamiliar or strange. In the distance, a woman in a simple dress and apron hurriedly crosses the street, clutching a basket of herbs, her eyes flickering with a mixture of respect and cautious curiosity. A group of soldiers, their armor dull and dented, pass by with heavy footsteps, their expressions guarded but respectful. Somewhere nearby, a man shouts orders to a blacksmith, whose sparks fly into the air like tiny stars, illuminating the dim, smoky streets. You notice the villagers' reactions, some wary, some welcoming, all accustomed to the daily grind of survival and tradition. And as you look around, it becomes clear this is not your time at all. The air is thick with history, and everything you see, hear, and smell is woven into a tapestry far older and more complex than the modern world you know. To truly understand where you've just woken up, you need to step back, take a breath, and see the bigger picture, the story that shaped this life and these walls. Because behind the shadows and dust lie truths that go beyond fairy tales and fantasies, waiting quietly to be uncovered. As you awaken in this medieval landscape, imagine yourself stepping back roughly 6 centuries into the heart of the late Middle Ages, specifically around the 14th or 15th century. This is a world shaped by the patchwork of kingdoms and duchies, where monarchs and lords rule from their stone castles, and the echoes of distant wars still ripple through the land like a faint, persistent drumbeat. It's a time when the familiar idea of nation-states hasn't quite taken hold, more a mosaic of shifting allegiances, feudal bonds, and land disputes, all woven into a tapestry of complex loyalties and fragile peace. Picture a landscape dotted with bustling towns and sleepy villages, each with their own rhythm. The streets are muddy and crowded, alive with the cacophony of merchants shouting their wares, fresh bread, livestock, herbs, more chaotic than any Saturday market in your modern city, but with more pigs than people, squealing and rooting through the filth. The marketplace is a riot of colors and smells, spicy herbs, roasting meats, the pungent aroma of wet wool and manure, all competing for your attention. Churches dominate the skyline, their bell towers ringing out the hours, sometimes more often than necessary, as if to remind everyone that divine time is measured in moments of prayer, not convenience. Roads are often muddy, rutted, and enlivened by the occasional cart breaking down or a traveler slipping in the muck, making every journey an adventure in patience and balance. Now imagine the society itself, layered and intricate, yet starkly divided. At the top sit the nobles and royalty, cloaked in finery, wielding power that's often rooted in inheritance and land ownership rather than merit. Below them, the clergy holds sway over both spiritual and political life, their influence extending into every corner of daily existence, from the village square to the king's court. The merchants, with their stalls and trade routes, form a vital middle tier, wealthy enough to enjoy relative comfort, but still vulnerable to the whims of war and famine. And then there are the peasants and serfs, labourers, bound to the land, working tirelessly from dawn until dusk, their lives a constant struggle against hunger, disease, and the unpredictable whims of nature. Rich and poor exist on opposite sides of an almost unbridgeable chasm, where the difference in living conditions is as stark as a palace's marble floors compared to a dirt floor in a peasant's hut. Speaking of the environment, consider the physical world around you. Forests stretch beyond the horizon, dense and mysterious, often filled with rumors of witches and bandits. Fields are divided into patches of wheat, barley, and rye, all cultivated with the same relentless routine: sowing, tending, reaping, and then doing it all again. Villages cluster along winding, often muddy roads that connect to larger towns, haphazard arteries of life and commerce. The towns themselves are alive with activity, the noise of blacksmiths hammering out horseshoes louder than your favorite concert, and the clang of armor from soldiers preparing for the next raid or invasion. If you look closely, you might spot a merchant cart overflowing with goods, pulled by a tired ox, slowly weaving through the throng, narrowly avoiding a stray pig or an angry street kid. The skies are often overcast, casting a dull light that makes everything seem a shade more grim, yet strangely charming, like a faded painting that's seen better days but still holds a quiet beauty. The rhythm of daily life is a cycle of routines that would make even the most dedicated modern workout seem like a vacation. They wake early, often with the crowing of roosters or the tolling of a church bell, signaling the start of another day's toil. For most, work is repetitive and relentless, ploughing fields, tending livestock, weaving cloth, or preparing meals over open fires. Taking a bath was a suspicious activity, almost like announcing to everyone you were planning something shady. So most people rinsed off in a basin, if at all, and only the wealthiest could indulge in a proper wash. Instead, they kept themselves as clean as possible through simple routines, like wiping their hands or face with a damp cloth, often scented with herbs or vinegar to mask the smell of sweat and dirt. Personal hygiene wasn't a priority, and diseases spread easily through unwashed hands and overcrowded conditions. Food was often plain: dried bread, boiled vegetables, perhaps some salted meat, and the idea of fresh, clean water was a luxury, often contaminated and best avoided unless you fancied a quick bout of stomach trouble. Your modern frustrations, losing Wi-Fi, waiting in line, battling traffic, are nothing compared to the absurdities of medieval life. Imagine trying to light a fire with damp wood on a rainy day, or carrying buckets of water uphill in heavy, awkward pails as your version of CrossFit. Forget the gym. Here, your workout is hauling water, chopping wood, and enduring the relentless grind of survival. And yes, your idea of a bad day pales in comparison to a peasant's. No Wi-Fi, no instant coffee, just a constant battle against hunger, illness, and the unpredictability of nature. Politically and culturally, this was a world of kings and queens, but also of chaos. The realm was a patchwork of kingdoms, each vying for power, often at war with neighbors or plagued by internal rebellions. Invasions from rival nations or barbarian tribes could descend suddenly, turning peaceful villages into battlegrounds. Plagues and famines lurked in the shadows, striking without warning, wiping out entire communities and reshaping the social landscape. Religion was the cornerstone of life, an omnipresent force that dictated daily routines and beliefs. Superstitions flourished. Some believed that carrying onions in your pocket could ward off the plague, while others swore that sniffing vinegar-soaked flowers could keep evil spirits away. Masks, but with beaks and herbs, much more medieval and less glamorous, were common among healers and those trying to avoid infection. And yet, in this seemingly harsh world, there were moments of bizarre charm and wonder, like the belief that a simple charm or superstition could make a difference, or that a mysterious herb from the forest might hold the cure. Perhaps in some corners, folks swore by carrying a handful of onions, or by sniffing vinegar-dipped flowers, hoping to dodge the next wave of sickness. These tales, strange as they are, highlight the resilience and humor of a people who, despite all odds, carried on. Now that you understand the vast landscape, the political chaos, the social divides, the unpredictable environment, let's zoom in a little closer. Enough about kings, priests, and plagues. It's time to explore what your daily life might actually look like in this world, how you'd survive, and what your routines would involve, from dawn's first light to the quiet hours of the night. Because, beneath all the grand schemes of power and superstition, it's the small, everyday moments, the mundane, the strange, and the sometimes hilarious, that truly define life in a medieval castle's shadow. As your eyes adjust, you notice the rough, uneven surface beneath you, probably a wooden plank or a dirt-flecked floor, cold and unyielding beneath your body. Your first instinct is to stretch, feeling the stiffness creep into your limbs after a night of restless sleep. You sit up slowly, your muscles protesting from the weight of heavy fabrics and the chill of the room. Before you, a basin of water waits, perhaps a simple wooden bowl or a battered metal pitcher filled with cold, clear, or sometimes murky water. You reach out, your fingers trembling slightly as you dip your hands into it, feeling the icy shock that makes you shiver. The water stings a little on your skin, but it's the best you can do. No warm showers here, only moments of refreshing splash, hoping the cold won't wake everyone else in the household. You splash water onto your face, the rough cloth of an old towel or a piece of linen scrubbing your skin, leaving behind a faint dampness, and maybe a few tiny scratches from the coarse fabric. You might wonder, just for a moment, about the obsession with cleanliness, which in this world is less about comfort and more about survival. Bathing was often seen as suspicious, perhaps even dangerous, a luxury that could invite illness or reveal too much of oneself. Instead, people relied on perfumes, herbs, and aromatic oils, dried lavender, rosemary, or a splash of vinegar, spread on cloth or dabbed onto wrists and necks to mask the odors of a hard day's work and the persistent scent of sweat and dirt. Imagine no sleek bottles or fancy soap, just rough herbs and a hope that a good whiff of vinegar would keep the foulness at bay. Forget your 10-step skincare routine. Here, survival is splashing some water and praying the smell doesn't scare the neighbors. Walking into the tiny, cluttered space that passes for your home, you're greeted by the scent of burning wood and the faint aroma of dried herbs hanging from the beams. The walls are made of dark, uneven planks, smudged with soot and age, and the furniture is simple, perhaps a rough-hewn table, a bench or two, and a chair that's seen better days. The fireplace crackles softly in one corner, filling the room with a smoky aroma that mixes with the scent of damp clothes drying over a hook or draped across a rickety chair. Utensils of rough clay and battered metal sit on shelves or hang from nails, knives, spoons, and a few small pots. The surface of the table might be sticky from last night's stew or stained from years of use. Touching the furniture, you feel the roughness of the wood, the coolness of the clay, and the slightly sticky residue of old meals and spilled drinks. The textures are unapologetically harsh, yet somehow familiar, like an old friend who's seen better days but still offers comfort in its own way. Now consider your clothing. The garments you wear are heavy, woven from coarse wool or linen, rough against your skin, heavy even on a warm day. Maybe a thick tunic, a pair of baggy trousers, or a simple dress that itches in all the wrong places. Your shoes are stiff, made of hardened leather or thick fabric, more suited for trudging through muddy streets than for a stroll in a city park. You might find yourself scratching at an itch caused by the coarse fabric rubbing against your skin, or shivering from the chill that seeps through the layers. Your body protests, stiff, sore, and a little itchy, like hugging a hedgehog instead of a cozy blanket. Modern's idea of uncomfortable clothing might be a scratchy sweater, but here it's wool that feels like it's trying to crawl away from your body, stiff and prickly, promising to turn your skin into a patchwork of tiny pricks. Your stomach rumbles, time for breakfast. You pick at a piece of dried bread, hard as a brick, which you chew carefully to avoid breaking a tooth. Maybe a slice of aged cheese, salty and crumbly, or a bowl of thin, watery broth. More a means of keeping hunger at bay than a culinary delight. The flavors are simple, sometimes bland, but enough to keep you moving. Imagine the taste of bread that's been sitting in the corner for days, or cheese so old it might have a personality of its own. Drinking water is a gamble, perhaps a dull, cloudy liquid from a bucket, sometimes with a faint taste of iron or vinegar, making you grimace and wish for something fresher. No fancy coffee or fresh squeezed juice, just whatever is available, often plain, sometimes sour, but always necessary. In this world, rituals of hygiene are rooted in superstition and practicality. You might have a small amulet or charm, perhaps a carved wooden object or a piece of bone, tucked into your clothing or hung on a string around your neck, believed to ward off disease or evil spirits. Before venturing outside, you say a prayer, or perform a quick ritual, perhaps crossing yourself or muttering a blessing, hoping that your protection is enough. Burning a bit of incense or herbs to purify the air isn't uncommon, especially before leaving the house. Smoke curling from a small vessel, filling the room with a faint herbal aroma. If you're lucky, you might have a small vial of vinegar or scented oil to dab onto your clothes or skin, attempting to mask the odor of sweat and dirt. These practices seem odd to us now, but they're woven into the fabric of daily life, a kind of ancient insurance policy against the chaos outside. Now, as you prepare to step out into the world beyond your humble dwelling, you might feel a strange mix of familiarity and alienation. The rough textures, smoky smells, and simple routines are a stark contrast to the sleek, sanitized world you left behind. Yet, there's a quiet comfort in the routine itself, a rhythm that's been followed for centuries, getting up, washing your face, dressing in your rough clothes, and facing the day's challenges with a mixture of grit, superstition, and resilience. This is life in the shadows of stone castles and bustling villages, a world where comfort is scarce, but adaptation is everything. And so, with your clothes donned, your water splashed, and your mind ready for what comes next, you step outside. The world awaits, rough, unruly, and full of stories you've yet to discover. But before you do, one thing is certain: you've already begun to understand that in this world, life is a constant balancing act between dirt and cleanliness, superstition and science, comfort and survival. And as you walk toward the future, remember that beneath the layers of grime and hardship, there's a strange kind of beauty woven into every rough edge, every smoky breath, and every humble meal. You step out of your modest dwelling, leaving behind the familiar, if somewhat grim, comfort of your home. The air hits you first, crisp and cold if it's morning, or thick and humid if the afternoon has settled in. Perhaps there's a gentle fog curling around your feet, or a sharp breeze tugging at your cloak, carrying the scent of damp earth, distant fires, or the faint smell of livestock. The ground beneath your boots varies, sometimes packed dirt, cracked and dusty from the sun, other times muddy and squelching, especially if recent rains have turned the streets into small, winding streams. As you move, you notice the uneven cobblestones or rough flagstones, each step announcing your presence with a dull thud or a slight squeak of worn leather. Your clothes, heavier than anything you'd wear in the modern world, flutter with the wind, a woolen tunic, thick trousers, sturdy shoes, and perhaps a cloak that's seen better days. You're already carrying a few objects that mark your role: a small pouch of herbs, a simple wooden mask with a beak, or a set of tools slung over your shoulder. The streets are alive with movement, people bustling past, their footsteps echoing on the stones, voices rising and falling in a rhythmic murmur. Children dart between legs, their shouts and laughter punctuating the street noise. Merchants shout their wares, fresh bread, cloth, livestock, each trying to outdo the other in volume and flair. Soldiers stand guard at key points, their armor dull but imposing, eyes sharp and watchful. Priests pass by, their robes flowing, hands clasped in prayer or clutching a crucifix. And everywhere the smell of frying meat, sour cheese, or the pungent aroma of livestock fills the air, mingling with the smoke from open fires and the faint scent of damp wood. You carry yourself with purpose, your role clear, perhaps a healer, a trader, or a craftsman, each with a set of duties that keeps this bustling community alive. Your hands are busy with your tools, your mind alert for the next task. If you're a healer, you might be headed to a patient's home, your small pouch of herbs swinging at your side, your mask, if you wear one, tight around your face, ready to ward off what you hope are just superstitions. As you navigate through the marketplace, your presence doesn't go unnoticed. Children stare at you, their eyes wide with curiosity, sometimes tinged with fear. Adults observe with a mixture of respect and suspicion, some nodding politely, others whispering behind their hands. You are an outsider in many ways, an almost mysterious figure moving through a world that is both familiar and profoundly strange. You pass a group of villagers gathered around a well, their voices blending with the splash of water and the clatter of buckets. A blacksmith's hammer rings out nearby, each strike resonating like a heartbeat, sparks flying into the smoky air. You catch sight of a nobleman riding past on a horse, his richly embroidered cloak catching the sunlight, while a group of peasants work silently in the fields, their backs bent from toil. The rhythm of this place, fast, chaotic, sometimes almost frantic, is dictated by necessity. You perform your duties amid this cacophony, whether it's examining a sick child, tending to a wound, or simply observing the daily routines that keep this society ticking. You might find yourself in a small chapel, lighting a candle or muttering a prayer, perhaps seeking divine favor or protection from the unseen dangers that lurk behind every shadow. Or you could be in the market, haggling over the price of a sack of grain, your voice rising above the din, your hands gesturing passionately as you negotiate. Every task is rooted in tradition, superstition, and necessity, each act a small act of defiance against the chaos of life. Some tasks seem almost absurd in retrospect. You might be asked to burn old clothes or herbs, believing it will dispel the miasma of sickness. Others carry charms or amulets, inscribed with prayers or symbols, hoping they'll keep the plague at bay. A few even believe that carrying a small bone or a piece of dried frog might ward off evil spirits or misfortune. Talk about ancient organic protection. Your reactions might range from bemusement to acceptance. The routines are bizarre, but they're also familiar in their own way, like a strange dance everyone has agreed to perform, even if no one fully understands all the steps. The community around you is a patchwork of relationships, respectful nods from the local noble, wary glances from the merchant, amused smiles from the children. You exchange quick words with a baker, a soldier, or a monk, each interaction layered with social expectation, a mixture of deference and cautious familiarity. You notice how people respond differently, some with reverence, others with a guarded skepticism. A nobleman might glance at you with a mixture of disdain and curiosity, while a peasant might offer a quick nod, grateful for your help, but wary of your motives. Among the crowd, you hear snippets of conversation, rumors of invading armies, stories of strange illnesses, superstitions about omens in the sky. Behind every lively market stall, every prayer in the church, and every casual greeting, there's a deeper current of collective anxiety, an undercurrent of fears that shape their every action. And in this world, even the simplest act, fetching water, tending a fire, speaking to a neighbor, is infused with meaning, superstition, and a dash of the absurd. But now, as you move through this vibrant, unpredictable landscape, it's clear that your role here isn't just about carrying tools or offering aid. It's about being a part of this complex web of social ties, beliefs, and daily struggles. You are both an observer and a participant in a society where life is a persistent balancing act between tradition and change, fear and hope, chaos and order. And as you prepare to step further into this world, remember that behind every interaction, every duty, and every breath, there's a story waiting to unfold, one that's as rich and unpredictable as the life of a medieval village itself. You feel it in the way the air around you seems thicker, heavier, almost suffocating, like a fog that refuses to lift. It's not just the physical environment with its narrow, shadowed streets and darkened churches, but an invisible presence that hovers over everything, the ever-present sense of dread. You notice it in the way people stare at you with wide eyes, whispering prayers under their breath as you pass, clutching rosaries or crossing themselves instinctively as if these gestures could ward off the unseen horrors lurking in the shadows. It's in the way the churches are packed at every hour, candles flickering like tiny beacons of hope amid the darkness, and the bells' tolls echo through the streets, deep, somber, announcing funerals or calling the faithful to prayer. The weight of collective fear presses down on everyone, making the air thick with unspoken worries. You can feel it in the silence that settles over the town at night, a silence so heavy that even the slightest noise, an owl's cry, the distant howl of a dog, seems amplified, like the universe itself is holding its breath. Daily life is infused with religiosity, routine acts woven into the fabric of your day. Before you begin any task, you might make the sign of the cross, fingers trembling slightly as if the act alone could chase away the evil spirits or illnesses. People bow their heads in prayer before meals, murmuring words of thanks or plea, their voices barely more than whispers. Images of saints are everywhere, painted on walls, carved into wood, hung above doorways, each one a talisman against the chaos. When a child falls ill, a family might carry a small, carved figure of a saint into the house, believing it will bring divine favor. During processions, monks chant hymns that rise and fall like waves, an ocean of sound meant to drown out the whispers of evil. The scent of incense lingers in the air, thick and sweet, swirling in the breeze like a tangible prayer. It's the medieval version of essential oils, except with a slightly higher chance of accidental poisoning given the questionable ingredients and the occasional mishandling of burning herbs. Today you might scroll through social media for comfort, But here, people clutch rosaries as if they were life jackets in a storm, desperately trying to anchor themselves in faith amid the chaos. Superstitions cling to every corner of this world like cobwebs. You see amulets hanging from doorways, tiny charms carved from bone or stone, believed to ward off spirits. Herbs are hung in windows or burned in fires to chase away the malevolent air, which is thought to carry disease and misfortune. Some believe that a small blood-stained cloth or a sprig of garlic can keep the plague at bay, while others swear that singing particular songs or reciting certain prayers will confuse or repel wandering spirits. There's even a belief that carrying a dead toad in your pocket might ward off the plague, an idea that makes you wonder just how far desperation can push human imagination, or that whipping oneself in the streets with blood and sweat mingling might earn divine mercy, an act of penitence that frankly looks more like a medieval workout routine. It's the spiritual version of aromatherapy, but with a higher chance of accidental poisoning or injury. You might chuckle at the absurdity, but these rituals are serious business, an attempt to control the uncontrollable, to push back against a universe that seems to have turned hostile. And then there are the collective fears that bind this community. Fear of the plague is constant, a shadow that darkens every thought and conversation. It unites people in their anxiety, but also divides them. Suspicions and accusations simmer just beneath the surface. A sudden death is met with whispers of witchcraft or heresy, and mobs often gather to lynch someone they suspect of spreading evil. You see it in the hurried flight of a family accused of consorting with the devil, fleeing through alleyways, their footsteps pounding like a warning drum. The fear of famine is just as pervasive. Crops fail, and the hunger gnaws at communities, making everyone paranoid that the next meal might be their last. The fear of divine punishment hangs heavy, every misfortune seen as a sign of divine wrath, punishment for sins committed or sins yet to be atoned for. You might witness a village square erupt into chaos as accusations fly, someone's shoddy crop, a strange rash, an unexplainable death. Each becomes a reason to suspect heresy or demonic influence. Fugitives hide in the woods, neighbors turn against neighbors, and the community feels like a tinderbox waiting for a spark. The air is thick with suspicion, and you can almost hear it crackle like static electricity in the atmosphere. As a healer or doctor, your role is entangled in this web of fears and superstitions. You are seen as both a potential savior and a possible accomplice to death. People look at you with a mixture of hope and suspicion, some beseeching you to cure their loved ones, others eyeing your tools with distrust, wondering if you serve the devil's cause. When you enter a sick room, the air is heavy with the smell of herbs, sweat, and fear. Your touch is gentle but cautious, mindful of the superstitions that surround illness. They whisper prayers under their breath, crossing themselves, offering up candles or relics, hoping that divine intervention will save their kin. Children clutch their mother's skirts, eyes wide with a mixture of trust and terror, while elders murmur prayers that sound like a litany against the darkness. Your presence might be met with silent prayers or desperate whispers, sometimes both at once, each person longing for salvation, but knowing that death often lurks just around the corner. Some believe that carrying a small charm, perhaps a vial of holy water or a relic, will protect you from the disease, while others think that blood sacrifices or strange rituals are necessary. You might have heard tales of doctors who believed that carrying a dead toad in your pocket could ward off the plague, or that whipping oneself in the street would earn divine mercy. Strange, almost comical practices born out of fear. Throughout this world of constant anxiety, the community's collective fear acts like a thick fog, slipping into every corner, clouding every decision, making even the simplest act feel heavy with unseen significance. Fear here is like the smoke from 100 chimneys, there whether you want it or not, curling around your ankles, filling your lungs, coloring your every thought with shadows and doubts. It creates a landscape of perpetual tension where every shadow could hide a demon. Every cough might be the start of the plague, and every prayer is an attempt to hold back the darkness. You become acutely aware that beneath all the rituals and superstitions, there's a core truth. Humans have always feared the unknown, and in these times the unknown is wrapped in sickness, divine punishment, and the dark whispers of spirits. Yet even in this heavy atmosphere of fear, life doesn't stop entirely. People still reach out, clinging to one another in moments of desperation, sharing stories, offering comfort, or simply holding hands in silent acknowledgement of their shared vulnerability. Beyond the prayers and charms, there are bonds that keep life moving, fragile, human, and surprisingly resilient. And as you stand amidst this swirling storm of beliefs, fears, and rituals, you realize that understanding these fears is key to grasping what truly drives this world. Because behind every prayer, every superstition, and every whispered curse, there's a human heart, beating uncertainly, desperately trying to find meaning and safety in a universe that often seems indifferent to their suffering. It's in the way neighbors lean on each other, not just for bread or warmth on a cold day, but for the kind of comfort that only another heartbeat nearby can bring. Perhaps it's a hand resting lightly on a shoulder during a moment of grief, or a shared cup of ale in the flickering glow of a tavern where laughter briefly pierces the gloom. These are the fragile threads that hold this world together, spun from necessity but woven with genuine care. Step inside a typical home and you see how family life extends far beyond the nuclear unit. Children run underfoot, their giggles echoing through rooms filled with the scent of bread baking and herbs drying on the walls. Grandparents sit by the fire, their wrinkled hands telling stories older than the stones beneath your feet, offering wisdom, or sometimes just an earful of scolding. Forget Netflix family drama here. Your cousin might literally sleep on the floor 2 feet away from you every single night, sharing a blanket and a silence punctuated only by the crackle of the fire. The family is both a fortress and a prison, a place of support and love, yes, but also a web of obligations and chores. You might be bound to your kin by vows made in childhood or by necessity, each member expected to contribute, to serve, to obey, often without question. Yet, in those moments of quiet companionship, when no words are needed, you realize that these bonds are what give life its small, stubborn glow. Across the narrow alleyways and open squares, you see friendship in its simplest form, neighbors helping each other with chores, sharing a loaf of bread or a handful of herbs. A woman might lend her neighbor a bowl of broth, whispering advice about the persistent cough or the strange rash. Men gather in the marketplace, exchanging news and gossip, their voices rising and falling over the clang of metal and the squeal of pigs. These bonds are fleeting, tied to the day's needs and the risks of disease, but they're also vital. Because in a world where death can come swiftly, loyalty and kinship are the only true currency, more precious than gold or land. And then there's love, sometimes whispered, sometimes shouted, often hidden behind closed doors or behind a veil of secrecy. Imagine a furtive glance across a smoky tavern, a quick touch of hands beneath a heavy cloak, romance in the shadows, catching fire in stolen moments that could be punished as heresy or witchcraft if discovered. Trying to find a sweetheart isn't like swiping right on an app. No, it's a careful dance of glances, subtle signals, and maybe a promise to meet beneath the old oak tree if the fiddles are playing softly enough. If you're lucky, you might escort a young woman to a festival, her hand trembling in yours as the music swells and the lanterns cast golden pools of light. Or perhaps in the quiet of a farmstead, two lovers exchange vows in whispers, their future uncertain, but their hearts fiercely committed. It's a world where a flirtation might be interrupted by a guard's patrol or a sudden outbreak of suspicion, where love is as much an act of rebellion as it is a comfort. You also notice how social hierarchies shape every relationship. The noble is revered, often with a mix of awe and disdain. His words carry weight, but so do his whims. A lord's command might mean life or death, yet he is also bound by the same fears and superstitions as his subjects. The clergy, meanwhile, stands apart, respected, feared, sometimes despised, yet always central to community life. Their rituals dictate the rhythm of the town, processions winding through cobblestone streets, banners fluttering, monks singing hymns that seem to rise into the very fabric of the sky. You can smell the incense, sweet, smoky, almost suffocating, and hear the soft shuffling of feet as pilgrims kneel in prayer. These gatherings are more than mere routines. They are the stitches in the fabric of social cohesion, moments when everyone, from the highest noble to the lowliest peasant, pauses to remember what's at stake. Sometimes those moments crackle with tension, rivalries between families, disputes over land, whispers of accusations of witchcraft or heresy. You've seen it, a heated argument in the market, a finger pointed, a crowd gathering, fists clenched, secrets spilling into the open. Even religious festivals aren't immune, rival factions competing for the best spot in the procession or a petty dispute over who gets to carry the relic. Life here is a constant balancing act, a delicate dance between trust and suspicion, warmth and wariness. And yet amid the chaos and suspicion, life persists because people need each other. You might be a healer, a doctor, or a wandering priest. Your role is complicated, respected by some, feared by others. They look at you with a mixture of hope and skepticism, a miracle worker or a potential agent of evil, depending on who's whispering behind their hand. When you tend to the sick, they clutch their crosses or clutch your arm, eyes wide with a mixture of desperation and hope. They whisper prayers, cross themselves, or hold out talismans, hoping that divine grace will find its way to their loved ones. You see the trust that's been placed in your hand, and the suspicion that lingers as if the very act of healing is a kind of magic that could turn deadly. Children peer at you with wide, curious eyes, clutching their mother's skirts, while elders murmur prayers that sound like a plea for mercy. You might even hear tales of bizarre remedies, like carrying a dead toad in your pocket to ward off the plague, or whipping oneself in the town square to earn divine favor. It sounds like the medieval version of essential oils, except with a slightly higher chance of accidental poisoning. Some believe that blood sacrifices or strange rituals are necessary to appease the spirits or gods they fear. It's a world where faith is both shield and sword, where the line between divine protection and superstition blurs into a tapestry of beliefs as colorful and as confusing as a patchwork quilt. Throughout all this, you feel the weight of collective anxiety. The community's fears are like a thick fog that rolls in every dawn and lingers until night. It binds everyone in a shared trembling, yet also drives them apart. Rivals for the same patch of land, whispering behind each other's backs, accusing neighbors of witchcraft or poisoning the well. You've seen it, a heated dispute over inheritance, a scorned lover's curse, or a sudden rush to mob someone accused of heresy. Public punishments become community spectacles, half justice, half-twisted entertainment, like medieval reality TV. People watch as a woman is dragged before the crowd, her fate sealed by rumor and fear, her punishment a reminder that in this world, trust is fragile and everyone is just one misstep away from disaster. Yet, despite the suspicion and the tension, there's a strange camaraderie, an unspoken understanding that they all share the same fears, the same superstitions, the same fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, divine mercy will save them. And of course, your role in this tangled web is vital. You are both part of the community and, apart from it, a figure who can bring relief or ignite suspicion. The way people look at you varies with the wind. Some see you as a healer, a guardian of their health and souls. Others see you as a potential witch or heretic, a threat lurking behind your tools and your prayers. They watch your every move, silent, expectant, sometimes accusatory. When you perform your duties, you feel the weight of their gazes, hope mixed with fear. They whisper prayers when you arrive, cross themselves when you leave, and sometimes, in moments of despair, they make offerings, tiny tokens, charms, or even strange relics, hoping that divine or supernatural forces will favor them, or at least keep the plague at bay. Your presence is both a comfort and a danger, an ambiguous beacon in a sea of superstition and fear. And as you navigate this world, you learn that beneath the layers of ritual and suspicion lie some truly bizarre beliefs. Did you know that some believed sneezing during a wedding was a good omen, unless, of course, it wasn't, depending on which grandmother you asked? Or that public punishments, like whipping or branding, were often community events, a grotesque form of entertainment mixed with justice. These stories, strange and sometimes hilarious, are woven into the fabric of daily life, serving as reminders that humans have always found ways to cope with their fears, sometimes by laughing at the absurdity, sometimes by clinging to rituals that seem just as strange today as they did centuries ago. All of this creates a tapestry of tension and tenderness, a landscape where fear is as pervasive as the air you breathe, like the smoke from 100 chimneys, curling into every corner, seeping into every breath. It's a world built on faith, superstition, and the unyielding resilience of people who, despite everything, still find ways to cling to hope, to love, and to one another. Because even in the darkest times, life persists, fragile, imperfect, but undeniably human. And in that persistence, you see the quiet strength that keeps this world turning, one shared glance, one whispered prayer, and one small act of kindness at a time. As your eyes adjust, you see a rough-hewn table, perhaps a simple plank laid over trestles, covered by a worn cloth that's seen better days, its fabric stained with the streaks of many meals. The surface is uneven, pocked with knife marks and crumbs, yet it bears the weight of all that's about to be shared. The light flickers softly from a nearby candle, casting shadows that dance over the uneven surface, illuminating the shallow dips and raised splinters. Nearby, trenchers of coarse bread, cracked and golden brown, sit beside a bowl of pottage, thick, bubbling with grains and vegetables, and a wedge of hard cheese, its rind rough and cracked. The smell of simmered herbs, perhaps sage and rosemary, mingles with the salty tang of dried fish or salted meat, depending on the day's catch or the season. You notice that utensils are sparse, perhaps a wooden spoon, a carved knife, or a simple horn for drinking, each item worn smooth by years of use, not polished or shiny, but familiar like an old friend. There are no gleaming silver forks here, no porcelain plates, just rough ceramics or sturdy trenchers, and perhaps a cloth napkin if you're lucky, or a piece of cloth torn from an old garment, folded hastily beside your plate. The textures tell stories: the roughness of the bread, the slickness of the greasy sauce, the cold metal of the cup in your hand. The act of eating is tactile, deliberate, a ritual of survival. Now compare this scene with the luxurious banquets of the elite, whose tables are laden with roasted game, candied fruits, and spices imported from distant lands. Here, the difference is written in the ingredients and the presentation. For the common folk, the menu is simple and hearty: a steaming bowl of pottage thick enough to fill a stomach and stave off the chill, bread so dense it could serve as a weapon if needed, and cheese that's been aged so long it's almost a relic. You might find eggs, boiled or fried if lucky, or a few onions and garlic to add flavor. On fish days, the table might be graced with salted cod or smoked herring, preserved treasures that sustain through lean times. The beverage? Often a weak ale, cloudy and sour, or water drawn from a well that tastes of earth and moss. Sometimes a small cup of vinegar or a splash of fermented fruit to mask the flatness. The idea of sugar or spices is a distant dream, reserved for the wealthy or for special occasions, when a pinch of cinnamon or a handful of dried berries might turn a meal into a celebration. And yet, even here, rituals shape the act of eating. Before you touch a morsel, there's a moment of prayer, perhaps a blessing, sometimes a plea for divine mercy, spoken softly or muttered under your breath. Hands are washed in a basin of cold water, sometimes with a splash of vinegar to cleanse away the dirt and grime of the day. The order of serving is clear. The highest-ranking guest or the head of the household eats first, their plate measured with care, a slice of bread torn and passed around like a sacred offering. Portions are measured out, no endless refills here, just enough to satisfy, not indulge. During fasting seasons, such as Lent or Advent, the menu shrinks further: no meat, no eggs, only fish or vegetables, and abstaining from rich sauces or sweet treats. It's a delicate dance of restraint where the food's scarcity emphasizes its value. Compare this to modern meals where you swipe a screen for a pizza delivered in 30 minutes, or order gluten-free bread that costs more than a day's wages. Here, the act of eating is often disconnected from effort: an app, a package, a container. But in this world, each bite is a small victory, a reminder of hard-won sustenance. The bread, often rough and dense, tears unevenly in your hands, leaving crumbs that cling to your fingers, an imperfect gift from the baker's oven. The pottage, thick and brothy, cools quickly, its surface shimmering with a thin film of oil or floating herbs. You might dip a piece of bread into it, scooping up the last bits of flavor before the bowl is emptied. Sometimes a neighbor offers a pinch of salt or a handful of herbs, sharing what little they have. You see the hunger in their eyes, famine's sharp edge sharpened by scarcity, yet softened by the communal act of gathering. Meals are more than just nourishment, they are displays of status. The Lord's table gleams with polished silverware, roasted meats carved with ornate knives, and goblets filled with rich wines or spiced ale. Servants move swiftly, filling goblets and clearing dishes, their movements precise and practiced, each gesture a silent lesson in hierarchy. For common folk, the table is a stage of modesty. Meat is rare, eaten only on special days, and the focus is on filling the stomach, not impressing guests. Still, even in humble settings, the act of sharing bread and stew creates bonds. The silent understanding that they are all fighting the same hunger, trying to survive another day. After the meal, the city's pulse slows, but life doesn't stop. People spill out into the streets and the taverns beckon. The air thickens with the smell of roasted meat, spilled ale, and the faint, sweet scent of dried fruits. Music begins to stir. Lutes and fiddles, their strings trembling with lively tunes that invite dancing and laughter. The night calls for small acts of rebellion, perhaps a quick dance, a joke whispered behind cupped hands, or a toast raised in secret. Because after all, food is not just sustenance, it's the first step toward forgetting the hardships, a ritual that binds the community in warmth and shared stories. And so, with the last crumb eaten and the last sip taken, the city breathes out, ready to embrace the next chapter of its restless, resilient life. For now, the table is cleared, but the night still whispers promises of music, laughter, and the simple joy of being together, even amid shadows and scarcity. Shadows stretch long across the cobblestones, their forms flickering like ghosts, while the distant hum of laughter and song drifts on the breeze. The smell of warm beer, mingled with dampness from the recent rain, and the faint scent of burning wood, clings to your senses as you walk into the gathering of the town's restless night. The town breathes in these moments, caught between the lingering fears of the day and the fleeting joy of communal life. As you move through the crowd, you notice lanterns swinging gently, casting golden pools of light over faces animated with quiet mirth. People are gathering around rough tables or huddled near the fire, their voices rising and falling in a chorus of stories, jokes, and songs. The uneven benches creak beneath them, the grainy wood warm from the bodies that have pressed against it all evening. In the corner, a group of men toss dice, small cubes that rattle like promises of luck, yet often land with the indifference of bills paid too late, tumbling like Boleto no fim do maize. The game is simple, a handful of coins, a roll of the dice, the hope that fortune favors the brave or the foolish. Their laughter rises, a rough, honest sound that mixes with the shuffling of feet and the clink of cups. You hear a tune, a melody played on a lute, a Rebecca, or perhaps a flute. Its notes, simple, repetitive, but filled with a warmth that makes the cold night seem less harsh. Some in the crowd tap their feet, others sway slowly, their boots marking a slow, steady rhythm on the dirt and stone, sweat trickling down their backs as they dance in a circle or a line. Their steps are unpolished, unrefined, yet full of life. An act of defiance against the darkness that creeps outside. You might even join them, your own steps tentative at first, then growing more confident as the melody carries you, the scent of sweat and smoke blending into the cool air. Nearby, a makeshift stage hosts a simple play, a moral tale acted out with rough costumes, painted masks, and exaggerated gestures. The audience watches in reverent silence or bursts into laughter at a clumsy gesture, a bawdy joke, or a moral that hits too close to home. The actors stumble through their lines, but the message is clear. Life is a moral game, and everyone has a part to play. As the night deepens, the festive mood shifts slightly. Flares of religious fervor flare up during processions, candles flickering like tiny stars carried through the streets. Men and women march with solemn faces, holding candles that cast a gentle glow, their voices singing hymns or psalms. The scent of wax and herbs fills the air as they pass by, their steps echoing in unison, a rhythmic prayer that weaves through the streets like an invisible thread. And then there are the darker sights, the flagellants, their backs raw and bleeding, walking through the streets in rags, whipping themselves to purify their sins or seek divine mercy. Their presence is a stark reminder that the celebration often dances dangerously close to the edge of fear, rituals that blur the line between hope and hysteria. You see curious eyes, children watching wide-eyed, elders nodding knowingly, and some averted in discomfort, while the flagellants' chants cut through the night, a mix of fervor and despair. And amid all this, you, perhaps a healer or a man of knowledge, notice the respect and caution in the eyes of the crowd when they glimpse you. Someone might approach quietly, whispering a question or seeking reassurance, their voice trembling as they ask for a blessing or a sign. You touch the edge of the building's wall, perhaps pressing a finger to a weathered stone to ward off ill omens, your presence a subtle anchor amid the chaos. The night's rhythm is a mixture of raucous laughter and solemn silence, an intricate dance of joy and fear, of life and its inevitable shadows. You watch as a woman laughs at a bawdy song, her face lit by the flickering fire, while just beyond, a group of flagellants marches past, their steps heavy with purpose. The bells toll softly in the distance, a reminder that everything, every dance, every prayer, every whisper, will eventually give way to the quietude of dawn. And in these moments, between celebration and sobriety, you realize that the town's heartbeat is both fragile and fierce. It dances in the shadows of the night, embracing the fleeting comfort of music, the fleeting hope of salvation, knowing that all things, whether joy or sorrow, must one day end. When the last song fades into the dark, the bells respond, reminding you that every celebration bears within it the seed of its own quiet departure. Rimos, dançamos, vivemos, e ainda assim, a cidade guarda seu costume mais antigo: nascer, prometer, partir. You find yourself in that quiet place where life begins, a humble room illuminated by a flickering candle, its glow casting shadows over a small basin of warm water and a rough cloth. A midwife's gentle hands cradle the newborn, their touch both careful and hurried, whispering prayers softly as the tiny chest heaves with that first tiny cry, like a bell tolling a new chapter in the endless cycle. The air is thick with a mixture of hope and trepidation, the smell of damp earth and herbs lingering in the background. It's a fragile moment, a miracle wrapped in linen, a promise whispered in the hushed tones of tradition, an acknowledgement that life, no matter how fleeting, is a sacred gift. As the days pass, that child grows, learning to walk, to speak, to love. In the village square, a young girl receives her betrothal ring, a simple band of iron or gold, blessed beneath the watchful eyes of neighbors. A small procession forms at the church door, hands clasped, bread and salt exchanged as symbols of union and future stability. Faint melodies drift into the air, lutes and flutes accompanying the vows, witnesses smiling quietly, knowing that the community's eyes are on them. Life's work then passes from generation to generation, an old carpenter's hands guiding the next, a grandmother's whispers of wisdom, a carved wooden bench worn smooth by years of sitting, stories etched into its grain. These objects hold memories, hereditary tools, embroidered cloths, a worn ring passed down through countless hands, each one telling a story of continuity and belonging. Then comes illness, an ache, a fever, a cough that doesn't fade. You see the simple bed in a corner, the cloth soaked with herbs, the whispered prayers that drift like smoke in the small room. When pestilence arrives, everything quickens, the rites are hurried, incomplete, the silence heavy with unspoken fears. No time for long prayers or elaborate ceremonies, just the unction of oil, the murmured words of care, and the mournful realization that some lives slip away quietly, leaving behind a lingering ache. If you are the healer, you stand between hope and helplessness, tending with steady hands, knowing that sometimes, despite all your efforts, death claims its due. The grave is a humble hole in the earth, a simple marker, or a plain cross. The bell tolls a grave, somber note, calling the community to gather. Silent, respectful, a aware that life's cycle continues, often quietly, sometimes painfully. The bodies are laid in shared graves, covered with earth that's cool and heavy, and in that quiet space, prayers are whispered, names remembered, memories kept alive at the dinner table, in stories told by candlelight. The church's stained glass windows reflect scenes of mortality, the dance macabre, skeletons holding hands with the living, reminding all that death is as natural as birth, as inevitable as the changing seasons. From the aged priest's lips, a passage from Ecclesiastes echoes softly. A time to be born, a time to die. A truth etched into the fabric of daily life. And as you listen to the city breathe, you realize how each small act, the passing of bread, the sharing of a cup, the quiet prayer, are woven into a tapestry of acceptance. Every dawn brings new life, every dusk, quiet endings. The village, with its simple routines and deep-rooted faith, demonstrates that there is beauty in this rhythm, an understanding that life's fleeting nature makes each moment precious. You close your eyes, and the soft glow of the candle begins to fade, the shadows lengthening into night. The city continues on, its breath slow, steady, unceasing. And you? You are part of this endless cycle, a witness to the sacred dance of beginning and ending, held in the gentle embrace of time's quiet passage. The last light dims, yet the warmth remains, lingering in your heart. Now, rest. The world softly exhales and you drift into sleep, carried by the gentle knowledge that in this cycle, every ending is a new beginning.